Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the next episode of the Dream Life Diaries. I'm your host, McKenna, and I am so excited to have my first guest on the show today. Here we have my sister, Melissa, who is somebody very near and dear to me, and I cannot be more excited to talk through her story about being a business owner with the Blue Root, and to learn more about changing your life path and adapting to anything and everything the universe throws at you when building a business or deciding what it is that you want to do in life. Episode is going to be about building something that you're passionate about and following the natural plan of the world, which oftentimes can't be predicted. Today's conversation is going to be great for anybody who's ever built a business, but even if you are not a business owner yourself, today we're going to talk a lot about planning and the difference between planning and forcing your big changes in life, adapting to change, and how to manage what life throws at you, even when it's the unexpected. So as I said, we have my sister Melissa on here today. So a little bit background to Melissa. She is, once again, my sister, but is also a chef, culinary expert, and the owner of the Blue Root, which is a zucchini bread business that started about 5 years ago. But Melissa, if you don't mind just giving us some background about you and fill us in a little bit more on the Blue Root and what your business is.
Sure. Probably like many other entrepreneurs, self-proclaimed serial entrepreneur, I went to traditional undergrad university and quickly after graduation realized I wanted to go to culinary school. Right after I got married, after graduation from Wilkes University, I went to culinary school and soon after started my first business, which was a full-on catering business. And then I took some time off to have my little babies, which are all grown up now, almost. And I took a little break to be mom. And then I decided I wanted to come back into my own business. So I first started out with a gifting company. So the Blue Root first started as a curated box company. And that was a fun way to meet new people and get my foot in the door in the Charleston area. And then I soon, after that, as soon as my kids were not just tiny babies anymore, they were toddlers, I was able to manage more time on my own. I went into catering. And then the zucchini bread business kind of landed in my lap unexpectedly.
So tell me a little bit more about the gift boxes you're doing. So I remember this back quite a few years ago already, but what inspired that? What initially gave you the idea to work with the gift boxes?
For the love of Charleston. When I moved here, it was for the area. I loved everything about Charleston, as you probably have found. I think I'm the reason why you came here, but it's hard not to fall in love with Charleston. And when we first moved here, it was, I feel like one of the first towns to be like the movement of small businesses. When I moved here, I quickly realized that all of these moms and all of these other entrepreneurs were making fantastic products that were highlighting the Lowcountry region. So the gift boxes came about because I wanted all of these things for myself. And I realized, wait a minute, if I can curate them into a box to send home to family to kind of display a little bit of Charleston, then I think other people around the country would want that too. So I started working with all the local vendors and makers and putting all of their products into one cohesive box. And we had them for all different occasions. And it was a really good job to meet new people, especially having just moved to Charleston. So I got to meet a lot of people. And it was an easier job to do with 2 little kids at home.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think what you're saying is so true. I think it's such a special city here and there's so much charm to it.
Yes,
that
charm.
I think you did such a good job being able to channel all of that charm into a box that you could pass along to other people and send everywhere. So I absolutely love that. And I know you were doing that for how many years? Is it?
So I started the Blue Root in 2011, and I probably did that for about 2 years. And then through the Blue Root and through Instagram, I started posting a little bit on Instagram to advertise the boxes. I met a few really good friends through Instagram that helped me kind of lead into the catering again.
Okay, so you're doing the boxes for a few years. So then how did that end up transitioning into the Blue Root, the bread business that we've been seeing today?
Okay, a quick step in between. We were doing the boxes, and through the boxes and Instagram, I met a dear friend of mine, Mary Jo Anderson, and she has a house on the same island, Isle of Palms, and she was looking for gift boxes for her vacation rental home. And she knew that I was getting back into catering, and one day asked me to deliver breakfast to a special guest that she was hosting at her vacation home on the Isle of Palms. I didn't have a whole lot of time to work with. I found out that this guest was coming probably 2 days prior to me having to deliver breakfast. And we had a breakfast that was set up, not a pre-made, but it was like a predetermined menu where we did like fruit salad and we did quiche and we did croissants. And it was a beautiful brunch spread. And the night before this breakfast was to be delivered, my husband Ty was online and he was looking at on Instagram and he was looking at who I was delivering breakfast to. And her name was Landon Hutchinson. And I'd never heard of her before, but he looked up her handle and he was like, you know what, Melissa, this seems like a special guest. I think that you should do something that stands out a little bit more. And I was like, what? 10 o'clock it was 10 o'clock at night.
That's crazy.
The night before. And he was like, I think you should make your grandmother's zucchini bread. And just in like a little backstory, he had teased me my whole life about the zucchini bread becoming a business. And I say teased, it's because we kind of thought it sounded silly. Like, who would ever have a zucchini bread?
Yeah, I know even the past few years when people ask me, like, what does your sister do for work and everything? And just saying a zucchini bread business, people just have, it's just the craziest thing to say.
No, it does not roll off the tongue very well. And I feel like whenever I say it, people are like, really? Like, that could be a business? But that night, he just reminded me, he was like, every time you take the zucchini bread to, as a hostess gift, or you take it to a party, everyone is always like, how do you make this? Can I have the recipe? And so he was like, let's make the zucchini bread. And I looked in my refrigerator and I had a single zucchini, which I don't even know why I would have because we don't really eat it.
Yeah, no, it's probably, you're so used to having so many boxes and dozens around, but I feel like that's just not something you normally have lying around.
Something I had lying around, but for some reason I had a zucchini, which looking back now is probably very serendipitous to this whole thing that I was not planning to have fall into my lap. But I whipped up a zucchini bread. It was 10 o'clock at night. And I remember thinking, how am I even going to present this bread to her? And I had twine, like in my craft bin from my kids' like playroom, and I had parchment paper. And I worked my high school job. I learned how to wrap things in parchment paper, and I just wrapped it up and tied it with a bow, and it looked actually really cute, crafty, and homemade.
Yeah. And which actually ended up becoming part of your brand image for the Blue Root actually after a while, which a little side note, but I mean, I ended up helping with the business for, I think, for a few times over the years, and we just spent hours wrapping these breads hand tied with twine and parchment paper.
Painstakingly beautiful though.
Oh yeah.
And I remember I was so nervous walking up to meet Landon, and I was actually shaking. But right before I left the house, my husband was like, take a picture. It looks really pretty. Like, you ended up putting together like a really, really beautiful last minute product, but like, let's take a quick picture of it. So I took a picture of it just on my phone, and I walked up to the door, and I'll never forget, she was so sweet and gracious, and she was like, what do you have there? And I walked with the bread first because it was the lightest thing to carry, and I had to go open the door to make sure I could carry in the rest of the platters. And I was like, zucchini?
How did she react when you said that?
And she said, I will never forget these words, oh my gosh, how did you know zucchini bread was my kryptonite?
Oh, so that was just so meant to be.
So meant to be. And I was like, oh my gosh, so you don't think this is crazy or weird? And she's like, zucchini bread literally is one of my favorite things. So she instantly invited me into the kitchen, and I had brought lavender honey butter to go with it. And the combo, again, just very last minute. And the combo, she was just so impressed. She did an instant video and put it up on her Instagram. And I kid you not, within probably 20 minutes of leaving her with the whole breakfast spread, that one post, the phone was ringing off the hook. I had already had a website, so people knew where to find me, and I already had an Instagram handle, but I had,
thank gosh, because can you imagine if you didn't have any of that? I mean, I think things would happen so differently, essentially. Like, you had those steps in place, and after that, it just kind of seems like it took off with a mind on itself.
It really became its own thing. I really thought I was going to be doing catering, and the next thing you knew, I was just taking zucchini bread orders. It really happened. When I say like overnight, it really was just like an overnight thing.
So just, things obviously ended up happening so fast. So you said it literally happened overnight. Phone started ringing off the hook and everything. So how did you adapt to that overnight success per se and build a business off of that? Because I feel like it would be so much of a rush at first. So what did you do to adapt, and what actually showed you that this was what you should be working on?
I think this is my big takeaway was everything that we were doing with the breads, we had to learn instantly. Like, as we went, we had to teach ourselves. I never even baked the breads at volume before, let alone baked, wrapped, and shipped them. And all of a sudden, these people were calling me from all over the country, and they're like, well, we're not in Charleston. How can we get your breads? Do you ship them? And we're like, absolutely, we do.
You do now.
Bake it until you make it. It was one of those things where we just figured it out as we went. I'm not going to say we didn't have any hiccups and we didn't have to like figure out some problems as we went, but it kind of just rolled within itself. Like it just became a seamless operation pretty quickly. It wasn't something we had to struggle with. For the catering business, I had been looking for kitchens to rent, commercial kitchens.
Right.
So I already was in that mind frame and I was finding kitchens. And thank goodness I was able to find a commercial kitchen pretty quickly. And that was the key to it all because I needed a place to bake. But it fell into place.
So did you know in your gut that that was what you're meant to start pursuing after that moment?
Yes and no. So the logical mind of mine, which when you're dealing with a business and you want to make money, you want to be profitable, but you also want to put your heart into it. Like it has to all make sense. So at first I was like, wait a minute. I really just questioned the whole idea of a zucchini bread business. I still wasn't on board with just making it just a zucchini bread business. But when the orders just kept coming in, that's when I did know. So like logically at first I was like, this is going to be a business. It's not like it's sourdough or like something else that was really popular at the time. But then I just realized that people just really liked a different product. It was easy to gift. And then fortunately for us, the one really good part about COVID was that our product took off even more. So COVID was a big catalyst for our success.
Definitely people at home shopping, being on social media so much, it probably definitely helped escalate that growth that you already were seeing.
Yes. And everyone wanted to send happy mail. So
yeah. I know we're saying that this was obviously different than you doing the gift boxes and everything prior, because I know you're previously in catering. So I guess how did this really line up with where you originally saw your business going?
Well, I think it's just the unexpected turns that your business can take you in. I never pictured this being a business. I never once thought I would have just a business based on baking a zucchini bread. So it was something I never pictured, but it was kind of what I needed at the time, but I didn't even know I needed it. So the catering was going well, but it was very hard to keep coming up with all different menus and keeping them fresh and keeping them innovative and catering to all of the different tastes, and different type of lifestyles, how people eat. And then all of a sudden the zucchini bread fell in my lap and I was like, oh my goodness, I only have to worry about one product. I only have to worry about certain ingredients and it's not like they're changing constantly. Now we did start to create different flavors within the zucchini bread realm, but it was easier to source just a few ingredients instead of constantly coming up with new menus and sourcing ingredients all the time.
I get that. So completely just like focusing on one thing, focusing on the thing that you're good at. I know you grew to start incorporating so many different flavors and everything too. So it's one of those moments where you could focus on what you're good at and focusing on perfecting that, which I think baking in large quantities, it's hard to do. I think we've seen that struggle with just me helping out when I was popping in here and there. It's just something that's so hard to perfect. But I think being able to focus on that really helped you drive that product to get it to the quality you wanted and get it to where you wanted it to be.
Yes. And practice does make perfect. It's not a difficult recipe, but there are some, tips that I've learned along the way. So it was a learning curve, but I mean, it was something that I didn't expect to learn. It wasn't something I researched prior to. I just had to figure it out as I went.
And so I know we were talking about how this was so unplanned for you. Do you think it's one of those things that was meant to be unplanned and you liked how you figured it out as you went along? Or do you think, it would have been something that you would have liked to plan out beforehand?
So I'm type A personality. Looking back, if I could change it, the initial response would be, I would love to have had a plan for it, but that's not what it was meant to be. It was meant to be completely unplanned. It was meant to fall in my lap the way it did. I mean, the story, I love telling how it fell into my lap because it literally just fell into my lap. I mean, I laughed at my husband's face the night before I delivered that breakfast to make a zucchini bread. And yet, here we are.
Yeah, I think I'll never forget talking to you on the phone through that because I think I was living in Pennsylvania still at the time, just being on the phone and saying, Melissa, when did you get like 20,000 followers overnight? It was actually like 24 hours. It was crazy how it just flipped and turned so quickly. And I think like we just keep saying it's one of those moments where you just know that the universe has something planned for you and you're in the right place at the right time. And I think this ties in so perfectly to what we talk on the show a lot, is trying to plan things out, but learning when you're planning things versus forcing things in life. You could plan out so much in your life and try and make this 10-year plan, but a lot of times it's not gonna go that way. And I think that really showed up for you. So how do you think this experience with the Blue Route and this just unfolding in your life has helped you learn about, I guess, these types of unexpected events in life in general?
Well, it's like anything, like you said, if you have a plan, you basically can just crumple it up and throw it away because life is going to throw you curveballs left and right. It's just, especially as an entrepreneur, I think it's just always being quick on your toes, and you have to make a plan, right? Like you have to know you have a goal. If you don't have a goal, you have no direction to even get you started. So you have to be like quick on your feet. You have to know where you want to go, maybe what the end goal is, whether it's a financial goal or whether it's, just making a product to help people. Whatever your goal is, you need that to get started. But I think you just have to go with it, the flow. You have to go with the flow. It's like it ebbs and flows. And just when you think you have something figured out, oh, you don't,
Yeah.
and you just have to be ready to shift and just be ready to change, the direction that you had planned to go in, because sometimes you just have to.
Yeah. I think that's so important to remember, because I don't think you could go really in any direction in life without a plan. I think you at least need to have some type of direction in mind, at least. But besides that, I mean, as we've seen, life will kind of make a path for you sometimes. But I think it's important, as long as you have a direction, you have some motivation behind something, you could really, move forward and really shock yourself with how much you can achieve. You honestly keep a direction in mind, but take off some of the control, which I know we were actually talking about before this, but I mean, loosen up on some of the control and let things happen naturally. I think you'll just be so shocked by what it is that can turn out in life, which maybe it's a zucchini bread business, maybe it's something else, but you never know what's going to come your way.
Absolutely. You have to just be willing to just go with the flow. Again, I'm type A, and every time I tried to really control a plan, every single time something shifted it.
Mhm.
Shifted my sales.
I know we were talking about, growing and scaling your business and everything. And I know now the Blue Route is taking a little bit of a change, right? And so when we're talking about all these changes in life and everything and surrendering to the plan of the universe and letting things happen as they're meant to, I think we definitely do get times in our life where we find it in ourselves that we need to pivot, and we need to pivot in a new direction. So have there been any certain times in the Blue Route where you felt like you had to pivot in a new direction or make a certain change?
We're actually on our third pivot right now. During COVID, we realized that we were growing faster than we can produce breads, and we were constantly sold out. And to be honest with you, a lot of people aren't very kind in that situation, and we were trying our best. I mean, I went from baking one zucchini bread for Landon and delivering it to the next day having to recruit all of my friends to be bakers and wrappers and shippers. And thank goodness a lot of people weren't working during COVID, because I was employing like a whole bunch of them.
I remember the assembly lines going, the friends going and training people by day.
Yes. I was like, yes, you're going to tie like 300 breads today. And what a great problem to have. I mean, our problem was that we couldn't keep up with production. We couldn't keep up with the orders. And that, as a business owner, that is a great problem to have, but it is still a problem, because if you're not getting it out to the customers fast enough, you're going to end up losing that customer. So that was our first hurdle. And to kind of fix that problem, we're like, okay, well, we need our own space. We need our own kitchen, that we didn't have to succumb to certain restricted hours, or we could have people working all night. We could train people. So I signed a lease on a building, and I do have a strong faith in God, and I do believe that things are meant for us and certain things are not meant for us. So when I signed the lease of that building, I was hopeful that it was the right move for us and we were going to expand. And I have to say, when I signed that lease, looking back, I didn't get that feeling. You know that feeling?
Completely. Yeah.
It wasn't a bad feeling, but I didn't get that feeling of good, like I wouldn't say butterflies or overwhelmed, because it was like a nervous situation, but it was not it just wasn't like it didn't feel right. It just didn't feel like it was the right puzzle piece, but I had to see it through. And I think that's another thing that's important to just mention, that like if you have a goal, you have to take a step and you sometimes have to see it through. And then by doing that, then you know that you can kind of check it off your box. It's either going to get you to the level that you wanted to get to, or it's going to shift your sales again and kind of push you in the direction that you're supposed to go in.
Totally. I think that's one thing I always say is that in life or business, wherever it is, there are certain times when you just have to try that thing that you keep thinking about, because otherwise you're never going to know. And especially in business, I mean, there's so many times when you're not sure of what the right direction is. So you have to at least try it to know for sure.
And I think in life, but in business and in life, anything you try, it could fail, but we can't look at it as a failure. We have to look at it as, I know I sound like an old mom, but you have to like take it as a learning lesson, and you just have to hope and pray that it shifts you into the right direction. So about 3 months after we signed the lease of that building, we just kept hitting roadblock after roadblock. It was during COVID, and the first part of COVID was business was booming and we were trying to keep up with orders, but we didn't have any issues getting supplies or anything like that. Second part of COVID, everything was super expensive. But it wasn't just the cost of goods for the breads that was expensive. It was building out the new space that we had rented. So we had this lease on a building and we had to completely convert it into a bakery. And we couldn't find people to work on it, couldn't find people to work on it in a timely manner, or we were waiting months for materials we shipped, cargo ships. And it just was not, everything we did just was not working out, whether it be like certain permits that we thought we were going to be able to get very quickly and easily. We had to just push harder and harder and harder. And it just kept getting impossible at every turn. And it was about 3, maybe 4 months into the lease when I realized that I had to make that call. It wasn't going to work out.
How much progress did you get into the building and to building out that space before you knew you wanted to maybe go in a different direction or wasn't the right choice for you?
We actually didn't get too far. We had lined up an architect, so we had plans drawn. We had a contractor set. We had everything in place to get started, but we actually didn't get much work into it. No, very little demo. We did a little bit of demo, but we couldn't get the materials. So they couldn't even do what they needed to do. Like we couldn't get the materials, we couldn't get the equipment, and we just knew it was just going to be an uphill battle. And we would have to spend so much money on a lease just waiting for the materials and waiting for everything to come in. And we just knew it just wasn't going to make sense.
Yeah, there's one of those times where there were just so many blockages in your way. And I know we were also talking about times when there's a difference between pushing through something to maybe learn a lesson and get to the next step. And there's other times when you're trying to shove past it and basically, the saying, try and force a square peg through a round hole. Yeah. And it could be so hard to decide when you're in either of those times. So I think there are certain moments in life where you are supposed to be learning and growing through something to get to the next step, and you can't just sit back and wait for things to come to you. How did you know for sure that you wanted to go a different direction?
In that moment, I really just had to look at it from a broader perspective. I had to take away my ego. First of all, it was like accepting that it was a failed attempt at something. And it's not a good feeling when you fail at something, right? You always learn from it. It always builds you up stronger because you can't get stronger unless you fail. But in that moment, I knew I had to tell the landlord. And I just want to throw in there, this spot that we had signed a lease on was in the perfect location. It was the perfect size. The landlord was amazing. And the other businesses surrounding it were amazing. And it complemented our product so much. Everything seemed aligned, which is essentially what led me to sign the lease to begin with. And then to think about being a few months in and having to tell this really sweet man that it wasn't going to work. And I knew that I was taking a chance on this because I signed a lease. So I financially was responsible for paying the rent on that until my lease was up. But he was so sweet and so kind, and having to admit to myself that it just wasn't going to work out, and having to tell all my friends and family that, oh gosh, we were taking this big leap and we were so excited it was going to grow our business. My ego aside, I remember lying awake at night and just thinking to myself, will I feel defeated trying to push this forward, or will I feel more defeated not listening to my heart and my instinct, which was at that moment just telling me it was time to close the door on this opportunity?
Yeah, and like you're saying, I think so many people face this issue in life is when you tell other people of your plans, it makes it so much harder because you're not just upholding something to yourself or to your business, which is beyond hard enough.
Yeah.
But I think it's just so hard for your family members to see you, like you said, quote unquote, fail at something, or for you to go back on the things that you said you were going to do. That takes so much courage and determination to be able to know what's right for you. And I think this really boils down to being able to listen to yourself at the end of the day and focus what's best for you and for your business and for your path, and trying to block out the noise, because I know, of course, being part of the same family, that everybody has an opinion. Everybody loves to tell you which direction to go in. And I know, especially with you, people would always fire things at you, whether it's, oh, you should do this, or that's a great idea, or you need to go in this direction. And I think you've done such a great job along the way of being able to really hone in on what your brand image is, what you want your product to be and your business to look like. So
thank you.
I love that, you've stuck true with it for so long.
Definitely. And yes, everyone has lots of opinions, and everyone will see your product, your business idea, and they tell you just exactly how you should be running it. And to this day, I still have people telling me how I should do it. And believe me, I need the help. It's not like I'm not open to it, but a lot of things have been tried, especially behind the scenes, that even our family probably doesn't even realize. But so signing the lease was our first pivot. And then the second pivot was we were trying to grow again, to like keep up with the demand. And at this point, the hours of baking were really starting to take a toll on me and my family. I still had really young kids, and I was spending so much time outside of our home and in the kitchen, baking. And I started to look into having someone bake the breads for us, right, under my guidance. And
because you couldn't ever have somebody come in and bake the breads for you in store, right? Because you said the recipe was pretty tricky. I know we always saw some issues to the point where it'd be really hard to explain to somebody else how to bake it.
Yes, it's again an easy recipe by ingredients. It's simple ingredients, but I guess the technique of it was a little bit more than I had anticipated. And I actually do think if we had still had that space and we were able to get someone in and train them, that with enough training, another baker could have produced the breads just as we were doing, or as I was baking them on my own. But I had heard about co-packing and co-producing, and I've heard of other baked goods doing extremely well with using a bigger facility where they take your recipe and they scale it to a larger baking format, and then they produce it at volume. And so that was my next step, because the kitchen that we were renting, our commercial kitchen, it was limited hours. And I took advantage of every hour that I could in that kitchen, but there was no time for someone else to come in and do more baking when I wasn't there.
Not even the hours. I mean, it was the amount of ovens that you had available,
right,
and the amount of mixers and everything. It was just so limiting on your production.
Yes.
I remember, you were looking into the co-packers, and tell me a little bit more about that experience as well, because I know that was always on the fence for a while, and you guys went down so many different pathways trying to make that work.
Yes. I took a summer off from baking, mostly to catch up with time with my kids, but I took that summer to find a facility. And what I didn't realize until I went through the process is a lot of co-packers will only make really specific products. So it took me an entire summer to find someone who would actually bake the zucchini breads. And they were in Charlotte, and we started driving back and forth several times. I wouldn't say a month, but like every other month we were driving back and forth, and we met with them. They took the recipe, they scaled it. And every time I was there and they did a big batch of breads, they came out beautiful. Like I was there, I watched the whole process. I loved their baking team. They had the sweetest women working there. And the guys who ran the place they were just really nice people. And I remember leaving there so excited, being like, this is it. And then I would leave and they would do the baking without me. And they would send me the products from Charlotte and I'd get them in the mail. And I was like, this just isn't it. It just isn't it. And we went through that process. It took us 1.5 years. And that was yet another. I remember getting so excited and feeling so confident about it and thinking, yes, this is like the next direction I'm supposed to go in. Like I finally found someone who can do this. And it made so much sense to me. And then every time I got so excited and I would share the news, then all of a sudden the brakes would come on, and it was almost like a whiplash feeling, It's like being in an accident, and like,
it's like when the rug gets pulled out from under you.
Yes, and every single time I thought we had it, and I would leave their facility and they'd be like, okay, we're going to send you samples next week. And I would get them and I'm like, guys, like what happened?
Yeah.
It was fine when I was there, and then I would get them and it would just be different. And I just knew that if I was going to go down that path, I'd be giving my customers a different product. And didn't want to do that.
Yeah, that wasn't what you started out to do. So at the end of the day, I don't know if we touched on this yet, but it was actually our grandmother's recipe.
Yes.
And so it was so special to us as well, and especially you growing up and baking with our grandmother and everything. And I know that was key to the Blue Root and what you're building, is you wanted to offer not just a good product, not just any product that's good and edible, which is of course great, but you wanted it to be specifically what we grew up on and that special recipe. So if it didn't match that, it wasn't something that you were going to put out.
Yes, absolutely. And the Blue Root is her. It's grandma. And I'll never forget when I started baking the breads. And that's why the breads, when they did fall into my lap, it was like a big hug because it was celebrating her. It was celebrating her recipe. And it was just a way to kind of feel close with her. Even though she was still alive, we were far away from her. And it was just so fun to call her and tell her about how many breads we were selling and where they were shipping, and we got to ship to every single state in the country. And she was just so in awe that this simple little old-fashioned recipe became so popular. But yeah, it was all to celebrate her. And at the end of the day, if it wasn't how she produced it, even though she said hers was always better.
Always. Everything she made was always better.
Even though she'd always say hers was better, she would, honestly, a few times she was like, Melissa, that was a really good bread. And so I just felt like if it wasn't that, it wasn't her. And there was no sense of me doing it if it wasn't her.
And I think that, it's so important as the Blue Root continues to change and move forward, is circling back around to the essence of why you started and your reasoning behind it. And I know I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I think sometimes we get so distracted when we're on a path and we have certain goals that we want to achieve and everything, we oftentimes forget about why we started to begin with. But I think you've done such a great job always coming back to that and that center. And I think that's what's helped guide you along so far, is having that core center to come back to. And I think we're seeing that now again as the Blue Root changes and pivots, that is still going to be the core.
And I think that this third pivot I'm really excited for, because when I think about it, and unfortunately our grandmother has now passed, and I have to think about the Blue Root in a whole new light now because she's the essence of it. Sometimes I feel like it's harder to hold on to because she's not here to, celebrate it with us anymore. But this new pivot is going back to the actual roots of the Blue Root, which I named the Blue Root. A lot of people don't know this, but the Blue Root is named after... I wish I had one to show right now. It's over there on the wall.
Should I go grab it?
Yeah, go grab it. Okay. I'm glad I have this readily available.
Yeah, so if you guys are listening to the audio version, this is one of my grandmother's recipes. But if not, go ahead and check it on YouTube and you can see the live version of this and one of her recipes that Melissa has now had framed on her wall for many years.
Yeah.
But
I have 6 of them up there because they're so special to me. But when I was growing up with my grandmother, all of her recipes, even when I was little, they all looked this bad. They were all in really bad shape.
Always tattered, always
like burn marks and food marks all over them. It's hard to tell here because it is a little bit faded, but the paper was always blue notebook paper. And I feel like she almost always used a blue pen. And so when I was naming the Blue Root, I wanted to go back to my roots of cooking. And it always took me back to this blue paper. And it just growing up with her, cooking by her side. I always tell the story. I was always like on a chair next to her at the kitchen. I was a little girl. And I just always remember, I can't even say I was leafing through a notebook because the notebook by then was destroyed. That's how old these recipes are. But I just remember flipping through these blue pages and I knew I wanted blue as part of the name. And Blue Root also is the route that you have to drive to get to our town. It's called...
I never even knew that part of it, actually.
Yeah, the Blue Root, 476.
Interesting. The more you know, guys. It's like the more you know. But yeah. I love it. I mean, it seriously has cooking stains all over it. It's not a copy. It's used so many times over and is so near and dear to us.
So getting back to like my roots even deeper on this next pivot, this pivot was the hardest one. And
I feel like we need to stop teasing around it. So fill us in and dive into what this next pivot is. I know your followers, everybody has been waiting as well.
I know. And I'm really bad at this. I'm not good at the teasers because before I actually release something, I like to make sure it's absolutely perfect. That's a perfectionist in me.
I think your teasers are so
cryptic.
They're not even your little teasers. It's not like, okay, here's a little clip and we're going to give you more. It's actually like guys, I'm planning something, but I don't really know what it is. We're going to go check it out for a while, and we're going to go ghost for a few weeks, and then maybe we'll show you.
I have to admit, I am awful at posting. It just is not second nature to me. Instagram is such an important part of our business. I really need to amp up, but you're going to help me with that.
Totally.
The youth on my side for that. But yes, our pivot right now is, well, I've been announced for a while that we actually closed down right after Christmas. And that was the hardest decision I've ever had to make with the bit. That's important to bring up because that had been gnawing at me for quite some time. I knew the business was kind of pedaling uphill and not getting anywhere. The cost of ingredients was really getting out of hand. And also the kitchen that I was working at, they had some insurance changes, and my hours were getting a little bit more limited there. And anyway, there was a lot of things that, looking back on it, it's funny. Like, I had that feeling in my gut for a long time that I knew I had to stop baking myself, and I had to actually put an end to the business. That part of the business anyway. It wasn't like I was getting rid of the Blue Root, but I had to stop baking, and it was really hard. The next pivot is going to be a dry mix, and it was something I thought about for a really long time. I had polled my customers. I have the best customers in the entire world. I'd love to make a shout out to all of the people who have followed me for so long. They are just the absolute best customers that anyone could ever ask for. And I polled them a long time ago, and I got a raving positive response back saying, yes, please do a dry mix. And when I think about that, I actually haven't really thought about it until now that our grandmother has passed. But that takes me right back to where it really all started when I was a little girl, standing on a chair next to her, baking. And I just envision all of these other children doing the same thing, baking this wholesome recipe next to a loved one and learning the ropes in the kitchen and just kind of creating some really good childhood memories that they can take with them.
And I think this ties into your actual personal life so well right now, because I know you're currently trying to teach your own kids how to cook, like grandma showed you and everything. So I think this is such a perfect time. I see the pieces really aligning for you. But I guess tell me a little bit more on this dry mix, what that's going to include for everybody, because I'm honestly curious myself. So like, what's going into it? What don't die? What do I need to throw in the bowl to make a bread as good as yours, basically?
Okay. So we took all of the dry ingredients and painstakingly calculated the ingredients so that you can at home make a loaf of fresh Blue Root zucchini bread. You will have to add, I guess, it depends on if you're making just one bread. We will probably have options for multiple breads, but as of now, for one bread, you'll just have to add half a cup of oil. You will have to add 2 eggs and 1 cup of zucchini, and then the rest is all in the dry mix, and it's going to be a very simple process.
It sounds, pretty much as easy as making a box cake.
Essentially, it's very similar to that. But we have the ratios of our seasonings in there, and it will taste just like getting one from our bakery. But you get the benefits of the wonderful smell.
Oh my gosh, I will never forget it. I will be dreaming of that smell forever. The smell of helping you bake in the kitchen. Is there something about it that I know nothing will ever match? It's so different than any other bakery or anything. Besides that, so I feel like people are probably going to ask you, do they sell pre-grated zucchini at the store?
Oh, that's actually a really good question. I've never seen pre-grated zucchini. I've seen spiralized zucchini, and you cannot not.
No zucchini noodles.
No zucchini noodles. Making that very clear. And while we're on the topic, we do not, we wash the zucchini, but we do not peel the zucchini. So we do the skin on. I know some recipes, they want you to remove the seeds. Some recipes want you to remove the skin, but we keep the skin on. And you just have to grate it on the chunkiest tooth on the grater, on like a box grater that you have at home.
Amazing. Oh, I'm so excited. I know I'm going to be a little tester for one of these soon. I cannot wait.
McKenna is newly gluten-free, so she's going to take home a dry mix with her today, and she's going to try the gluten-free, because gluten-free was such a big part of the Blue Root business of the zucchini breads. And we had so many diehard gluten-free people who just said that the recipe was just such a good option for them.
The gluten-free ones were better than the original. I swear they're my all-time favorite.
Well, it's the exact same recipe with just gluten-free flour, and I'm so glad that it works out. And honestly, it bakes so similarly to the traditional zucchini bread with the regular flour in it. So, but another thing that is great about making it at home is not only will you be able to get the experience, you can share the experience with someone you love, but also if you want to experiment with the recipe, I think this gives you the opportunity to do that. We always had people say, like, you should make this flavor, like you should make that flavor. And we tried a lot of them. I mean, we loved customer input and we would try so many different flavors. And if you've been a follower of the Blue Root for a while, you know, we would always do like a special flavor, seasonal flavor, holiday flavors. And, you know, I can't say they were all a home run, but we really tried our hardest to, like, you know, keep a variety out there.
Most of them, I mean, people went crazy over, I mean, the banana one. I mean, we could go on forever, but are you planning to do any flavors in the
Oh, yes.
in the mixes?
So I'm very excited. To start out, we will be offering the original, the chocolate, and the banana, because those are like we call it like the trifecta, and they'll all be available in gluten-free as well. So those 3 flavors in the regular flour and in gluten-free. And then as we get it rolling, we also will be offering baking kits. So basically you could take the mix and you can put in any bread pan that you have at home. But what we will also do is sell a kit where you can buy the pans that we use, the liner that we use, and the bags that we used when I was doing the baking for the Blue Root. So that way, if you want to gift it, you still have all of the packaging and you with the label on it, like we'll give you everything that you need and it'll be a kit and you can bake it at home. And then you can say, you know, it's homemade. And then you can still gift it to someone if you want to. So the Blue Root, the zucchini breads made such a great gift for like a sick neighbor or someone who just had a baby or even a bereavement gift. So you will still be able to do that.
A gift with a little side of experience, actually. Yeah, no, I love it because I know the gift aspect of it was huge, and so many people would send them to everybody, especially as a home warming gift. I just feel like this can go in so many directions. And I have one more question for you on that topic, but are you planning to include any with the icing in it they used to make? That used to be a fan favorite too.
That is so funny. I would hope to be able to do that. I would hope to. As of now, no. But maybe I could send, I don't know how to like do that at the halfway point. You know what I mean? Like the icing, I'd have to actually make the icing. But I've had requests for the icings and I've had requests for our butters. Our butters, I never sold on the website, but locally at like farmers markets and things like that, I would sell them and people loved those. So maybe in the future.
Yeah, down the road.
Yeah.
We'll see where this next step brings you, because obviously the universe loves to bring a lot of pivots and new directions.
The universe has a plan for the Blue Root. I wish I knew what it was, because the roller coaster I've been on has been exciting.
So I guess tell me a little bit more, circling back on what made you decide to do this next pivot and how you knew for sure that it was time.
Okay, yes. It may have been just pure exhaustion getting to me, but it was a lot of things. I knew in my gut for a while that I could not keep up the pace that I needed to for the Blue Root. The escalating cost of ingredients was also getting out of control. Looking back now, I mean, the cost of eggs alone right now definitely would have had such a huge impact if we were still at full scale baking. But everything was just going up in price. Even the ingredients, so things like our packaging, the packaging tape, the box sale, everything was just going up and up and up. And in business, they always say work smarter, not harder. Mm-hmm. And I knew, just like adding it all up in my head, not just financially, but just adding up all the hours and everything, and nothing was making sense. And then the kitchen that I was baking at, it was kind of the final straw that came to me. And I have to say, I've had a really great experience and relationship with the kitchen I was renting. And we were friends and we were business partners. And one day they had like a 10-year insurance policy, and then all of a sudden they had to renew that. And me being there was going to affect their insurance policy by so much that they couldn't afford it. And quite frankly, it was becoming too expensive for me as well. And that was like, I needed that cut and dry, aspect of it, because I kept thinking with my heart and not my gut. And I kept thinking with my heart, and I'm like, I can't give up on it. I can't give up on it. And I knew I wasn't giving up on the Blue Root, but the baking itself, I just knew that I had to, but my heart didn't want to give it up.
I think there definitely comes a time where we're so back and forth where, forgive me for always coming back to spirituality or the universe, but the universe comes to a point where it's giving you, a time where there's no other choice. There has to be something that is based on being rational or just logic, because otherwise you'll keep going back and forth between your head and your heart forever. And there comes a point where something has to come your way to draw the line and say, nope, we're going to leave that in the past. I mean, as you're saying, there's been signs for a long time now. And I know having 2 young kids as well. I mean, it's just so much on your plate to be able to juggle all of that and running a business so many hours of the day. How were you feeling about making that decision? I know we talked a lot about having that gut feeling. So how's your gut feeling about making that decision, and how do you feel about this new direction?
So in my gut, I knew the answer. Like I said, I had to put my heart aside. But when I had that situation come up with the insurance and it just did not make sense, that's when I knew. I'll never forget typing the Instagram post and the newsletter to my customers. And I remember talking it through with like our mom, and I of course talked to you, and I talked to one friend who was still really working with me, Jen. She was just, with me the whole time. And I talked with her about it for hours. Talking really helps, but it just kept coming back to, I just knew. I just got to the point where I really just knew. If it was universe, if it was God, it was something really just solidified it for me. And when I actually made the decision, same thing with the decision on not moving forward with the renovation on the leased building that we had signed. At first, it was hard to rip off the Band-Aid, but once I did, all the wounds kind of like healed better. Like it made it feel like less pressure. All of a sudden it felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. And even though it was sad and it was bittersweet to like let go of something like that, in my heart and my gut, they finally started to align.
And I think, what we've seen so much is there can be times we have to make a really hard decision, and it's so hard sometimes to leave things in the past, but once we do make that decision, you'll see how you feel so much better afterwards. And it might take a little bit for things to get into motion or to find its way to level out and work out for you. But I think sometimes we know the decision we have to make, and once we finally go ahead and do that, new doors will open up for us and new things will start falling in place.
Absolutely. Once you get past that hard decision, and you actually make the decision that you know that you're supposed to, then, like you said, things can open up and you can start following the path that you're actually supposed to be following instead of battling uphill constantly and getting nowhere.
Exactly. And if you've ever been feeling that way about something where it's just an uphill battle, it's not going anywhere, I think that's just such a sign that something needs to change.
Absolutely.
And you might not know exactly what it is, but something's got to change.
And that's the thing, because I didn't have an exact plan for our next pivot. I just knew I had to stop baking.
And now you're figuring it out.
And now I'm figuring it out.
I know, and I could not be more excited for you, honestly. And now I didn't honestly even know the whole plan yet until you sharing it all today. So I'm so excited. I cannot wait to try out this new bread. But I mean, essentially from this episode, I mean, we pretty much hit on so many great points. Basically, follow your gut and listen to your intuition and know when it's time to make a change in life, whether that's a big change, a small change.
I think it's just important to trust yourself. If you actually let your mind get quiet for a minute and you can actually tune into yourself a little bit, and it's hard to do, but everyone has the ability to do it, then you know what you have to do.
Exactly. And after all that, do you have any specific tips that you'd like to share, or any takeaways?
Always be ready for a change, for sure, and never make a concrete plan that you're unwilling to change, because it's the only way you're actually going to grow, not just survive, but thrive, is if you're open to change and be willing to explore the things that you didn't even plan for.
Absolutely. I think stubbornness can only get you so far.
And we're Polish and very stubborn.
It's a learned family. I think we're a family of stubborn people. I think we're both at this time in our lives where we're starting to figure out how much I can be blocking other things.
Yes, for sure.
Once you start to let go and loosen up on your control, things will start coming together. They'll start falling into place. I love it. But Melissa, thank you so much for hopping on here and talking about the Blue Route. And I cannot wait to see where everything goes next.
Thank you.
I'm
so excited.
Yes, I know your followers are waiting and you're going to be doing a release soon. But I can't wait to try the new bread mix. And
will you take a video of it for me?
Oh, of course.
Okay, good. I need to make sure that everyone can make it, so we need video proof.
I'll be the tester for it. Don't worry. I can't really cook that well. So
you bake really well.
I do bake,
but you bake well.
My cooking skills are a little subpar.
You come to my culinary school. I'm like,
I will.
Kids culinary school.
Next step, next pivot, guys. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening today. And make sure to go ahead and follow Melissa at The Blue Root, right, on Instagram. So go ahead and follow Melissa at The Blue Root, and go ahead and follow my account on Instagram for some more at thedreamlife.diaries. And you can find any links or Instagram handles from today's show between the two of us in the show notes below. But I think that's all for today.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. Okay, talk soon. Bye.